So I left a pretty edgy comment on one of Bering's videos, and I'm not exactly proud of that, but now he's subscribed to me. And since there's a non-zero chance he's watching this video right now, I'll start with a little mini review of his album. It's called Bering 2016. I'd describe it as sounding a lot like the Pogues, but with an Australian singer and none of the personality. It's a really dull album. I'm sorry. Don't get me wrong, it's very impressive considering this album was recorded by a bear. Don't quite know how you did that, but I have a lot of trouble seeing any sort of worth in this piece of art whatsoever. Like, I'm wondering why he even decided to make this. And, are those some familiar chords I'm hearing?
Well, you done me, you bet that I felt it. I tried to be chill, but you're so hot that I melted. I fell right through the cracks, and now I'm trying to get back.
I can feel a true passion for music in each track that I haven't felt in folk music up until this point.
Really, Corin? You heard Sufjan Stevens, Sybil Bayer, Jessica Pratt, Joanna Newsom, Iron and Wine, Islaja, that one Ulver album, and Orion Rigel Demise, but the Bearman Swearman was the one that won you over? Okay. Moving on. So now that I've reviewed your album, I'd implore you to do the same with me. Just make sure it's one of the good ones. Oh, and by the way, I saved the original album cover from before you got hit by the copyright gods. I personally think it's a lot better. Still not that great. I would have preferred to not have him on the cover at all. You're not Bjork. Not everyone can pull this off. But really, did Bering have to change his image like that? I'm gonna play the devil's advocate and say no. Don't get me wrong, he's a bad bear. He has bad opinions and bad practices and boring music. But he's not a plagiarist. For context, there was a time when Bering used this bear, which had origins in the Cartoon Network show Total Drama Island. The creators of the show didn't like that, so after a huge, messy squabble of copyright strikes and having his channel taken down and just a lot of drama overall, he looks like this. Bipedal, somehow more smarmy, I guess it's okay. It really didn't need to happen, though. He may have looked like the bear from Total Drama Island, but it was used in a very different context and ultimately had a different meaning. So yes, I will defend Bering to the death when it comes to this particular issue. He's still an asshole, though.
To anyone who is still arguing that, science shows there's two genders and anything else is just feelings, you're wrong.
Oh, beg your pardon. So there's more than two genders. What are they?
That's a good question, Bering. While we're at it, why don't you tell me what color this is? Oh, you don't have a name for it? Well, I guess it doesn't exist. Genius. So let's get into the main topic of this video. A lot of people have spoken about how capitalism is an objectively inhumane and awful system that leaves millions needlessly suffering, and if you want to learn more about that, you can binge libertarian socialist rants. I'm here, however, to provide an entirely different angle, and that is how capitalism relates to the artistic world. It doesn't. Art is notoriously unobjective. The entire point of art is to attribute worth to things that are worthless, by changing it to look like something else, by arranging it in ways that look pretty, or just by looking at it in a different way. This flies in the face of the entire concept of supply and demand, and also leaves conservatives whining endlessly about
modern art or conceptual art.
The channel Innuendo Studios has a very nice video on this that I suggest you all check out, called Tomatoes or How Not to Define Art. At one part of the video, he says that art has an especially loose and slippery definition through merit of it being both created and critiqued by humanity itself. It has no definition, it has no set value. That's the real reason a bunch of wooden crates can sell for $1 million. Because only one person needs to decide that it's worth $1 million for it to be worth $1 million. Call it money laundering all you want, but the real cause is the subjectivity of art clashing with the objectivity that conservatives want to keep around. Because of this, it's a pretty bad idea to try making a career out of selling your original art. It's not like you have a bunch of oranges that you can readily sell at a set price. You're selling an idea, which by all accounts is objectively worthless. It's unreliable, and we can't really expect most people to really become artists in our current economy. And of course, some people will get lucky, but the starving artist will remain an iconic archetype until we fix the way money works. You know when you find an album that's really weird and obscure and experiments in new and edgy ways but really just seems to push all the right buttons for you? Why isn't all art like that? Well, the person who made that album you love so much was only aiming to please people with your exact tastes, which is admittedly a very small audience and a bad business decision. But isn't that better than making every effort to statistically please every individual on God's green earth? Now, I understand a lot of people legitimately like making music that happens to also make money, but it's nowhere near the majority. In my opinion, making changes to a work of art in order to make it more sellable isn't an artistic decision, or at least not a decision in the hands of the artist. The real artist here is capitalism. And if you haven't noticed, capitalism can't pay for shit! In a perfect world, the motivation of profit could safely stay the fuck away from artistic creation. We're getting there slowly. So while we're still talking about music, let's play a little game. How many albums can you name that satisfy these two conditions? 1, it has a legitimately strange and unique sound, and 2, it sounds like it cost a lot of money to make. Now, I might just have shitty music taste, but I can't think of that many examples. The first thing that comes to mind for me, at least, is Björk's Biophilia, known by some as the most underrated album of all time. It's a huge record, full of session musicians and weird custom-made instruments while also being endlessly boundary-pushing and beautiful. You go, girl. Bon Iver's 22 a Million is an awfully mixed piece of crap, but I respect it for at least taking a couple of risks, in the first half anyway. But these musicians are privileged. Björk probably made back the money. Bon Iver definitely made back the money. Not everyone can take risks like that. And really, both these albums have tenuous but observable roots in singer-songwriter pop stuff. Can you imagine spending thousands of dollars on an album that reaches the pretentiousness levels of, say, my third record? Something so far up its own ass that it defies logic and reason. Now that's something I know doesn't exist. I made Trickle Down for free. It was a zero-risk effort, and now it's forever going to be a part of my discography, and I have to live with that. I touched on this briefly in a video that's intentionally filled with misdirection and confusion, so I'll say it a bit more clearly here. Copyright law has no place in our current society. It only exists to ensure artists, actually just corporations, make as much money as possible, which will become completely void after we stop requiring people make money in order to live. Derivative art, or art that explicitly utilizes previous work for its own artistic agenda, is seen as less valuable or original. However, transforming a Diana Ross song into an uncanny commentary on globalism is just as valid an artistic statement as any. And might I add, was a decision made entirely independently of the original artist. I do not know Diana Ross's stances on globalism, and she has not really made that known in her music, but Vectroid has. The people keeping copyright law in practice don't seem to think of derivative art as having as much value as completely original art, and instead would like this sort of thing to be illegal, which is a completely regressive state of mind. Now, I'm not aiming for the concept of artistic ownership to be abolished. The author doesn't need to die. In my opinion, bearing in mind the backgrounds and opinions of an artist is a fun method for judging art in a deeper way. Sky Simplified gets a lot better once you know I'm a flagrant homosexual, and The Anthill gets a lot better once you know I'm diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. We can definitely find a medium between pure artistic communism and strictly enforced intellectual property laws. But I've heard a few people say, won't people stop creating works of art if they aren't guaranteed a reward? Well, for one, they aren't guaranteed a reward. Go back to the first part of the video. Secondly, of course they won't. People who care about pushing boundaries in art probably weren't expecting a big fat paycheck in the mail in the first place. Abolishing capitalism won't stop that, and will, in fact, benefit people who want to make more expensive, boundary-pushing music while not being as famous as Justin Vernon. Wouldn't that be nice? CGP Grey says that a painting and poem-based economy is impossible, but is it really? In a post-scarcity economy, it's not unreasonable to assume that artistic decisions will start worming their way into practical objects. Imagine you can get any doorstop you want for free. Assuming the doorstops are all equally functional, some of you might choose the prettiest one, the one that looks best underneath your door. Maybe you'll go further and get one that has the communist flag colors on it, because the symbolism of your ideology literally propping doors open strikes you as profound. That is a very corny example, but I'm certain some people will come up with better ideas for doorstop-based art once currency becomes a non-variable. Why not have literally every man-made object be assumed to contain artistic intention? That's a utopia I can get behind. I'm trying my best to contribute to it myself, imbuing artistic meaning into what could have been purely informative video essays. My last video, Study of TJ, doesn't just get less visually interesting as it goes on because I got lazy. It's symbolic of the futility of trying to approach TJ's content in any rational way and the intense depression that falls on those who attempt the task. That's right, I pulled a Lars von Trier on all your asses. Furthermore, the clip I chose at the beginning was just a touch of foreshadowing. TJ looking so pleased that he could make money off of the SJW's idiocy, unknowingly presenting a portrait of his entire channel. I implore you to make artistic readings of my video essays to come, as well as taking the information I present at face value. I'd be honored. In the grand scheme of things, this might seem a bit petty. Capitalism has so many offensively blatant flaws in it that its relation to art probably doesn't even need to come up. However, I think that as an artist, I should speak up when art is compromised. Art isn't about making compromises. I think art is an important part of humanity that deserves to flourish uncontrollably, and while the endless human suffering in the hands of the dollar might be a bit more of an obvious problem, what I'm saying is a good thing to keep in mind while you hold those picket signs. Good night, Baring.